What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, an event I'm really watching to see how it unfolds is the situation in Ethiopia. You have a country of 130 million people and growing, the most populous landlocked country on the planet. And they are a rise in power, not only in Africa, but in the world. And of course, as a power, they're going to want to assert their own type of influence or their empowerment to decide the fate of their nation. And it's hard to do that when you're landlocked and easily cut off from the sea. Not only that, by you're cut off by what some would consider a lot of more insignificant players. You're talking about Somalia, which is barely a country, and some people will argue even that. Djibouti, which is kind of an outpost for international militaries, and Eritrea, kind of a North Korea on the continent of Africa. There's this hermit kingdom, probably with a fraction of the accomplishments, and it's a military state. So you have Ethiopia hemmed in, and they want to grow, but this is causing a lot of angst in Egypt. What's being more of a legacy power, you can say, by lack of better options, in this part of the world, in that Eastern Mediterranean, as well as Egypt controls the Suez Canal. And Egypt itself is also a very large player with over 100 million people, nearly 120 million people, the most populous Arab country in the world, great friends with Saudi Arabia, so they always have their backing. And a lot of people try to be on, when I say a lot of people, a lot of powers, like especially America, Israel, try to keep Egypt relatively happy because of the role they play, one in dealing with the Palestinians, but also because the Suez Canal is the life force between a Mediterranean and Indian Ocean trade. It allows that great shortcut where people don't have to circumvent all of Africa to get to connect these two markets. Egypt on the Suez Canal, that is one of the great waterways of the world. So a lot of people, a lot of countries try to keep Egypt kind of happy, all things considered. The problem with Egypt, though, is it has all these people, and it's no longer the country or the nation it used to be. This isn't ancient Egypt. This isn't the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. In actuality, it's a relatively resource poor country with a very significant large population whose probably its greatest strength right now is military, and which it has proven over and over again to be so. But outside of this is a country that's highly insecure because of this, because it has so many people, but yet it sits upon a very critical root of the world. This makes this a very dangerous place, similar to an environment that you will see in Pakistan, except they have nuclear weapons. So you have this angst because this is a country that when things go bad, it can go really bad. So nevertheless, Saudi Arabia and Egypt have traditionally been allied. And this is why when I saw that Turkey was moving closer, it was a failed alliance, but they were talking about an alliance between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, hence which Turkey has pulled out or has not joined. But I thought that was odd because historically speaking, these guys are not aligned. But Turkey has been playing a lot of roles within the region. Probably one of the best geopolitical players over the last 5 years. All things considered, they're winning over and over again. Whether you're talking about Azerbaijan, or you're talking about Libya, whether you're talking about the blockade they try to do against Qatar, and the Turks send soldiers down to protect the Qataris. So Turkey had, ever since the coup that was plotted against, the failed coup plotted against President Erdogan, Turkey has been on a roll, winning, winning, and winning. And one of the ways that they're winning is Ethiopia wanted to push through the ocean through Somalia, and they were going to recognize Somaliland, where sits there the portion of Somalia that sits astride the Gulf of Aden. And Ethiopia is just trying to figure out a way to get to the sea without going to war. But of course, as a growing nation, I don't think they're discounting war. As well as Ethiopia is growing, they're also having to stomp out a lot of regionalism as they go from a more fragmented, disseminated power model to a more hegemonic or centralized power model, which will be necessary for them to be a player on the world stage. If you're fragmented, you have a situation such as Iraq or Syria, where foreign powers will come in and they'll put money behind different fashions, and those fashions will overthrow the government. So this is an inevitable step that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is making as far as unifying the country. A lot of the people that held power before don't like it. But without this step being taken, Ethiopia will remain fragmented and therefore vulnerable to bigger powers coming in and bribing various sides. So Ethiopia is rising now, and they want sea access. And for some reason, President Erdogan has been able to ride the fence between these two players, Somalia and Ethiopia. He's been doing a lot of weapon sales, a lot of diplomatic missions to Africa, whether you're talking about the Mediterranean region or the east coast of Africa, primarily. But I thought that was interesting because I know that he wants to keep Somalia intact. Somalia uh, is a relative, is a good ally to Turkey, but at the same time, Ethiopia is a good ally to Turkey. So I thought how he was going to balance that, because Egypt, especially with Egypt, because Egypt is a friend of Somalia. And the reason why this is all important is because, as I said, Egypt is a big population. Most of the population lives upon the Nile Valley River. The Nile is kind of the only substance of the sustenance of the country. It's definitive for its survival, its existential, as well as culturally. The Egyptian people are attached to the Nile. And guess where the Nile comes from? Well, it splits into two rivers. One is the White Nile, which with sections off into Uganda, water flows from Uganda. The other is the Blue Nile, where 80% comes from the highlands of Ethiopia. Ethiopia built a GERD, or the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which can pretty much strangle the Blue Nile. So that means it can dry up Egypt. Now, of course, Ethiopia is doing this to harness energy sources and take advantage of the resources they have available to them. But the Egyptians, being the arrogant people that they are, don't feel as though Ethiopia should have the rights to control the resources on its own land. And they have been jockeying to stop Ethiopia from building it. And now, since Ethiopia building, they've been trying to build alliances to get it shut down. So Turkey moving closer to Saudi Arabia and Egypt, I thought was odd because they had a relationship with Ethiopia. But nevertheless, when Ethiopia was getting hot with Somalia over Somaliland, Turkey was able to step in. And I'm thinking, wow, it shows the great diplomatic effort for Erdogan. As you can see, Somalia is still intact. Ethiopia didn't put the base on Somaliland, at least not yet. In fact, it was Israel to be the first country that officially recognized Somaliland as a nation. So this trip right now, I'm watching President Erdogan. He just went to Addis Ababa, and he is having a great welcome, and you can really see the closeness. He went and brought one of the cars down there from Turkey, gave a car to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. I think one of their electric vehicles, if I'm not mistaken. But they have a great relationship, and you can see that. So I'm like, what's going on here, right? Either this guy's moving closer to Saudi Arabia and de facto Egypt, which is against Ethiopia in the dam, or he's with Ethiopia or and against Somalia because, well, not necessarily against Somalia, but he's going to be for Ethiopia. He knows sooner or later Ethiopia is going to want access to the sea. And I think he's playing a really tight game right now because I think he is for both. I think he is for Somalia, and I think he is for Ethiopia, but not necessarily for Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And the reason why I say that, I seen him move closer to Saudi Arabia and Egypt, but that's the oddball here. It just doesn't make sense. Now, as I said, President Erdogan's probably feeling generous because they had a lot of wins. They just got the big win in Syria with the party that he supported, and now in control of the country. The Kurds don't get their own nation. These are all things that are great. But the bad blood between Egypt and Turkey, it's just not something you can get over. The bad blood between Turkey and Saudi Arabia is not something you can get over. But when I just heard in the news, Turkey, they've been working on this deal, and this is one of the reasons why they've been allied with Somalia, is they want to drill for oil in off the coast of Somalia. And if you know geopolitics, you know this is odd, right? There's no oil there. Like, there's no oil off the coast of Somalia. Like, why would they want to drill for oil out there? All the oil from the Gulf states, it comes from the east side of the Gulf. It doesn't come from the Red Sea side. It comes from the Persian Gulf side. Gwahar, the largest oil base for Saudi Arabia is on the East Coast. That Persian Gulf. This is where you get your Bahrain's, your Qatar's, your UAE. All these Gulf states are on the eastern half of the Arabian Peninsula, but the western half, your Red Sea half, your Yemen, the west coast of Saudi Arabia. This is none of these are oil states. Eritrea, uh, Somalia, Kenya, and that's how oil is, right? If you look at South America, where is oil? It's right there off the coast of Venezuela, and of course, Venezuela neighbor Guyana has oil. If you look at Africa, where's the oil? It's all in that Gulf of Guinea or that West African area, right? From Nigeria all the way down to Angola. When you have this offshore oil, it's usually in large swaths. You just don't have these random oil spots, more or less. You have, and that's the funny thing, because I'm like, I know these guys seriously aren't going down there for oil because it's and especially Erdogan, he's in the middle, he's right next to Iraq, he's in between Iraq and Russia. There is no dearth or lack of oil for President Erdogan. So I had to dig a little bit closer. I digged a little bit deeper into the story, and I just was fortunate enough to see an article come out. Guess what President Erdogan has done? He just sent some warships down there. He was to the Horn of Africa. He just sent warships down to Somalia. This is commercial drilling, though, right? This is a commercial exercise to go get oil. He wants to help the Somalians find all this great oil so he can get rich and sell it to global markets. This oil that doesn't exist. But maybe this is a cover. Maybe this is an opportunity for him to strategically militarize the area. So why would he want to do this, though, right? What is his great concern? What is the great threat that he wants to set up a strategic foothold in this part of the region? In so many places in the world, why is this area so important? And the reason why I think it is because I do think it is to freaking control Egypt. That Suez Canal means nothing if you don't control the Gulf of Aden, right? You only control it one half. This is why Egypt was a British colony. This is why Somaliland was a British colony. The British, one of the great naval powers of history, they knew they had to control both the north and the south of the Red Sea to make that waterway valuable. You can't do anything if you have ships that can go in and can't exit, and vice versa. So, and on top of that, I don't think he wants to weaken Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is his check on Egypt. Egypt, when you dig into the relationship with Egypt and Erdogan, these guys are natural enemy, or Turkey and Egypt. These guys are natural competitors in the Eastern Mediterranean, demographically, resource-wise, strategic wise, all of that. These guys are natural competitors, and I don't think even with this Mr. Nice Guy Islamic solidarity that President Erdogan is presenting, the great leader that he is, or geostrategic thinker that he is, he hasn't forgot these things. And now, when the tide is high for him, he's doubling down. And now when Saudi Arabia is scrambling, trying to find its next gig as the world challenge oil with its EVs, and in Egypt, who's just looking for its next paid off. Don't forget, Egypt is one of the biggest receivers of U.S. funds, because they have to pay these guys, because Egypt isn't as affluent as its Arabic cousins in the Gulf states. So Egypt is basically a mercenary for hire, but they have some teeth. And I think Erdogan is hedging bad fallout with Egypt. And I think he knows that Egypt has consistently been a thorn in his side. Egypt has been running military drills with Greece multiple times. It's called the Medusa series. And even to the point where it was Egypt, Saudi Arabia, as I said, these two countries are very close, but Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Greece, Cyprus, these are all countries that are very contentious for Turkey, especially Greece. Turkey always have issues with Greece because the space is so tight between those guys. And go back thousands and thousands of years. The Turks kicked the Greeks out of Anatolia. Like, this is a very contentious relationship. And Egypt is butting up to their NATO ally, Turk's NATO ally, where there's no love lost. So when Turkey sees that Egypt and Greece is there, of course I think they're strategically hedging the Egyptians. On top of that, let's not forget the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood, President Erdogan had a great affinity for the Muslim Brotherhood, and they eventually came to power in Egypt democratically. And what happened? They were cooled out and called a terrorist organization, and their leader was imprisoned and eventually died in captivity, right? And a lot of people attribute it to his maltreatment under Egyptian custody. So this was a leader he had. And by the way, it was the military in Egypt and Saudi Arabia that was against the Muslim Brotherhood, right? That cooled. It was the Egyptian military that cooled this leader, President Mohamed Morsi. So we put all these things together. I don't think Erdogan has forgot any of this. And I think he wants Ethiopia to stay strong and intact and give them the power they need or ally. And that's why Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is so accommodating to Erdogan, because he knows that Erdogan's on his side. Ethiopia is a natural check to Egypt. And on top of that, you have this situation with Somalia, and he's going to balance these relationships out. And, you know, you got to figure out, where's Ethiopia going to go next? Eritrea is right there. So, and there's been some contention between Eritrea because they can't do anything with Djibouti. It's too many foreign powers in Djibouti. Ethiopia, so there's going to be some amazing trade deal between Ethiopia and Somalia. Ethiopia is going to have to figure out a different angle to get to the sea. But wherever way they decide, I think the Turks are going to support Ethiopia, and they're also going to support a unified Somalia because they're down there oil drilling. And this commercial oil drilling requires military installation and logistical support, which could also be used to offset an aggressive Egypt. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear your comment below. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.